The morning rush at the diner was in full swing, clattering plates, sizzling griddles, and the steady hum of conversation. But Harper's world slowed the moment she saw him. A golden retriever puppy, small and frail, sat near the curb. His muddy fur clung to his thin frame, ribs faintly visible beneath his coat. He wasn't whining or barking, just watching. His big pleading eyes locked onto every plate of food carried past him, as if hoping someone would spare him a second glance. Harper's heart clenched. She had seen stray dogs before, but something about this one struck her deep. He looked abandoned yet hopeful. Setting down her tray, she turned to her manager, Mr. Connor. "Hey, do you think I could—" "No." His response was sharp, barely glancing up from his clipboard. "We're not feeding strays." Harper clenched her jaw. The diner threw away food every day. What harm would one meal do? Moments later, as she passed the counter, she made a decision. Grabbing a plate of untouched scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast, she wrapped it quickly and added a small cup of water before heading outside. The puppy flinched as she approached but didn't run. "Hey, little guy," Harper said softly, crouching down. "Are you hungry?" The golden retriever hesitated, sniffing cautiously before devouring the food with desperate hunger. Harper gently stroked his head. "You're not alone anymore." Unbeknownst to her, someone was watching, and her life was about to change. Forever. Just as Harper smiled at the pup, a voice snapped her out of the moment like a whip crack. "Harper." She turned to see Mr. Connor standing in the doorway, arms crossed, face twisted in disapproval. "What are you doing?" he barked, his tone loud enough to draw attention from inside. Harper stood, brushing her hands against her apron. "You were just feeding a stray," he cut in, stepping closer. "How many times do I have to remind you that this is a business, not a charity?" Harper's cheeks burned as customers peered through the window, whispering among themselves. "It was just leftover food," she argued, keeping her voice calm. "We waste so much every day, and he clearly needed it." Mr. Connor shook his head. "And what happens when he comes back tomorrow or the next day? Soon we'll have strays all over the place. If the health inspector sees this, we could be fined." Harper glanced at the puppy, who sat quietly, ears drooping as if he understood the tension. "But no buts." Mr. Connor's voice was final. "You're fired." The words hit like a punch to the stomach. "For feeding a dog?" she asked, stunned. "For disobeying me and embarrassing this establishment." He turned on his heel. "Collect your things and go." Customers stared as Harper stood frozen, her mind reeling. Just like that, her job was gone. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she crouched back down beside the puppy, forcing a smile for his sake. "It's okay, buddy," she whispered. "It's not your fault." The golden retriever leaned against her, offering comfort. In his own quiet way. Harper ran her fingers through his matted fur. "What now?" she murmured, mostly to herself. Bills were due, rent was looming, and now she had no income, all for a small act of kindness that felt insignificant, yet somehow monumental. The puppy licked her hand, tail wagging faintly, as if trying to reassure her. Then, the soft hum of an approaching car caught her attention. A sleek black SUV pulled up in front of the diner, the engine purring before shutting off. Harper squinted against the afternoon sun as the driver's side door opened. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped out, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. "Excuse me, miss." His voice was calm, authoritative. "Are you the one who fed this dog?" Harper hesitated. "Yes, I am." A pause. Then, much to her surprise, the man smiled. "I've been looking for him." Harper blinked. "You have?" The man nodded. "This little one has been missing for days. He belongs to someone very important to me." The golden retriever tilted his head, as if trying to recognize the man. Then, as though something clicked, he stepped forward, cautiously sniffing the man's hand before nuzzling it. The man's smile widened. "There you are," he murmured, scratching behind the pup's ears. "We've been so worried about you." Harper's heart ached. "So he's yours?" "Not mine," the man corrected. "My daughter's. Scout is her best friend. She's been heartbroken since he disappeared." He turned to Harper, his expression suddenly serious. You have no idea how much this means to us." Harper swallowed. "I'm just glad he's safe." The man reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek leather wallet. "You've done something incredible today." He handed her a business card. "I'd like to offer you something in return. Come by this address tomorrow morning. I think I have an opportunity you'll be interested in." Harper stared at the card, speechless. The address belonged to the Evergreen Animal Rescue Foundation, one of the most prominent rescue organizations in the city. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," the man said with a knowing smile. "Good people deserve good things." As he led Scout to the SUV, the golden retriever paused, glancing back at Harper with those same soulful eyes. She waved. "Take care, buddy." The puppy barked, a happy, grateful sound, as if promising this wasn't goodbye. As the SUV disappeared down the road, Harper stood in place, staring at the business card in her hand. Fired or not, something incredible had just begun. Soulful. "Eyes met hers the day before. I think I can do that," she whispered. "I know you can," Andrew reassured her. As the day wound down, Harper was tidying up one of the kennels when she felt a gentle tug on her pant leg. Turning around, she found a scruffy little terrier mix gazing up at her, his tail wagging excitedly. She let out a soft laugh and crouched down, scratching behind his ears. "Well, aren't you adorable?" "That's Tucker," a passing volunteer informed her. "He's been here for a while, sweet little guy, but he's nervous around people." "Not anymore," Harper replied, smiling as Tucker eagerly licked her hand. The connection she felt with the animals was instant and natural, and for the first time in weeks she experienced a spark of pure joy. That evening, as Harper left the rescue center, she found herself replaying the day's events in her mind. Just yesterday, she had been humiliated, fired, and uncertain about her future. But today she was walking home with a renewed sense of purpose and a job that already felt like it was meant for her. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. A message from an unknown number flashed across the screen. "Thank you for taking care of Scout. My dad said you're working at the rescue now, and I just wanted to say you're amazing. Lily." A warm smile spread across Harper's face. A single act of kindness had set off a chain of events she never could have predicted. "Maybe getting fired wasn't the worst thing that happened to me," she murmured, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. In the distance, she could already hear the faint barks and yips of dogs, as if calling her back to the place where she truly belonged. The Evergreen Animal Rescue Foundation quickly became a source of fulfillment for Harper. Each morning she arrived early, greeted by the chorus of barking dogs and the quiet hum of caretakers starting their routines. With every passing day, her bond with the animals deepened, especially with Tucker, the scruffy little terrier who had stolen her heart. But it wasn't just the dogs that made the place special. The people at the foundation were a team, passionate, kind, and supportive. Harper hadn't felt this kind of belonging in a long time. Andrew had been right. The work was tough, but it mattered. One afternoon, about a week into her new role, Harper sat on the floor of the play area, laughing as Tucker tugged on a frayed rope toy. Andrew approached her with a thoughtful expression. "Harper, can I talk to you for a second?" She looked up, her laughter fading slightly at the seriousness in his voice. "Of course." Andrew motioned for her to follow him inside. He led her to his office, where the walls were lined with photos of successful adoptions and stories of rescued animals, each picture a testament to the Foundation's mission. As he settled behind his desk, he gestured for Harper to take a seat. "I wanted to check in on you," he began gently. "You've been doing incredible work here. The way you connect with the animals, it's something special." Harper felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. I've never felt more at home." Andrew smiled faintly but hesitated before continuing. "There's something I need to tell you, something about your old boss." Harper stiffened. "Mr. Grady?" Andrew nodded, leaning forward, his voice dropping slightly. "It's come to my attention that what happened at the diner, your firing, may not have been about the food you gave Scout." Harper frowned, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" Andrew sighed. "A few months ago, someone anonymously reported Mr. Grady to animal control. The claim was that he had been mistreating strays near his diner, scaring them off aggressively or worse. Harper's stomach dropped. "You're saying he's been hurting them?" Andrew's expression darkened. There wasn't enough evidence at the time for a full investigation, so nothing came of it. But your story caught my attention, and I started digging. It turns out that feeding Scout may have been the final straw for Grady. He didn't want animals hanging around his diner, and your kindness went against everything he stood for. Harper sat back, stunned. She had known Grady was cold, but she never imagined he could be cruel. "He fired me because I did the right thing?" She whispered. Andrew nodded. "That's exactly why we need people like you, Harper. When I saw how you cared for Scout, I knew you were someone who wouldn't turn a blind eye to cruelty." Harper's thoughts raced. The idea of Grady mistreating helpless animals, those who had nowhere else to go, made her blood boil. "Is there anything we can do?" she asked, her voice shaking with determination. Andrew gave her a knowing look, as if he had been waiting for that question. "Actually, yes." That evening, Harper couldn't stop thinking about Grady. Memories of her time at the diner surfaced, like the stray cat she had often seen lingering in the alley, and the way Grady would yell and chase them off with a broom. At the time, she hadn't given it much thought. Now everything made sense. Her resolve hardened. As she walked home, Tucker trotting happily at her side, she glanced down at him with a quiet promise. "You're coming with me tomorrow," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. "We're going to make sure no other animal has to suffer because of him." The next morning, Harper arrived near the diner just as the early shift began. She stayed across the street, watching from a safe distance as Grady barked orders at his staff. Then in the alley behind the building, she spotted movement. A small, scrawny kitten darted behind a dumpster, searching for scraps. Harper barely had time to react before Grady stormed outside, broom in hand. "Get out of here!" he snarled, swinging aggressively. The kitten hissed, scrambling for safety. Harper's heart pounded as she pulled out her phone and hit record. Over the next few days, she continued gathering evidence, documenting every cruel act with the help of a few evergreen volunteers. She captured footage of Grady shouting, waving his broom, and even spraying water at helpless animals. When she brought the recordings to Andrew, his jaw tightened with anger. "This is more than enough to reopen the investigation," he said. "We'll work with animal control to put an end to this." Harper nodded, her heart racing. It's time he's held accountable. That night, as she sat beside Tucker, a mix of emotions washed over her: anger at the injustice, pride in taking a stand, and hope for what was to come. For the first time, she realized that losing her job at the diner hadn't been a setback. It had been the beginning of something much bigger. And the puppy flinched, its wide, frightened eyes locking onto hers. Harper didn't move any closer. Instead, she waited, keeping her voice soft and reassuring. "You're safe now, I won't hurt you." She gestured towards Tucker. "Look, he's here too." Right on cue, Tucker lay down, resting his chin on his paws, his tail wagging gently. The small puppy eyed him warily, curiosity flickering beneath the fear. After a long moment, it took a cautious step forward. "That's it," Harper encouraged, her voice soothing. "You're doing great." She reached into her bag, pulling out a soft piece of bread she had brought just for this moment. The puppy's nose twitched, drawn by the scent. With a small, hesitant whimper, it crept closer. Then, finally, it took the bread from Harper's hand. "There we go," she whispered, a smile breaking across her face. Slowly, she reached out and ran her fingers over its trembling back. Feeling the tension in its tiny frame begin to ease, she carefully scooped it up, cradling it against her chest. The puppy buried its face in her sweater, too exhausted to resist. "You're safe now," she murmured. "I promise." By the end of the day, Harper and her team had rescued 3 strays, 2 cats and the trembling puppy she had found. Back at the foundation, the vet examined each one, treating their injuries and ensuring they had food and warmth. Harper stayed, late, watching over the puppy as it slept for what was probably the first peaceful time in its life. Andrew approached quietly, a proud smile on his face. "Good work today, Harper. You saved lives." She looked up, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "It feels right," she admitted. "Like I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to do, Andrew placed a hand on her shoulder. "This is just the beginning." Harper nodded, her heart full yet heavy. Mr. Grady was still out there. Until they stopped him, more animals would suffer. But for now, she looked down at the sleeping puppy and whispered, "One at a time. We'll save them all." Over the next few days, Harper threw herself into her work at the Evergreen Animal Rescue Foundation. The strays they had saved were beginning to heal, responding to kindness, food, and warmth. The trembling puppy, now named Scout, became Harper's special focus. He was still skittish, still unsure, but each time Harper approached, his tiny tail wagged a little more, yet even as the animals recovered, the shadow of Mr. Grady loomed larger. Whispers of his cruelty were spreading, and though no official action had been taken, the diner he ran had begun losing business. Grady's frustration was becoming impossible to ignore. One afternoon, as Harper and Andrew reviewed adoption applications, the phone rang sharply. Andrew answered, his expression darkening almost immediately. "Evergreen Foundation," Andrew speaking. "Yes, this is our organization. Trespassing?" His voice was firm, but Harper could hear the anger lacing it. On the other end, Grady's voice growled something indistinct, but Harper didn't need to hear the words. She could imagine his face, red with rage, his jaw clenched, his eyes cold as stone. Andrew straightened in his chair. "If you believe you have a claim, take it up with Animal Control. Good day, Mr. Grady." He slammed the phone down and exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. "What did he say?" Harper asked. Though she already knew, Andrew's voice was tight. "He's accusing us of trespassing and trying to sabotage his business." Harper frowned. "That's ridiculous. We haven't said a word to anyone about him." "He's lashing out because he knows he's being watched," Andrew replied. "And that makes him dangerous." That evening, as Harper locked up the shelter, Andrew caught up to her at the door. "I'm having security cameras installed tomorrow." Harper blinked. "You think it's necessary?" Andrew's expression was grim. "I don't want to take any chances. Grady's temper is getting worse, and I won't let him come near this place. You've done amazing work, Harper. I just want to make sure you're safe." The words struck a chord. No one had ever looked out for her like that before. She smiled faintly. "Thanks, Andrew. I'll be careful." He nodded. "And keep Tucker close. He's a good watchdog." Harper walked home, Tucker at her side, ears alert. Every shadow seemed darker, every noise sharper. When they reached her apartment, she locked the door twice and sank onto the couch, stroking Tucker's fur. "It's fine," she whispered. "We're fine." But she wasn't sure she believed it. She wasn't going to stop until every stray animal, like Scout and Tucker, was safe. Harper's hands trembled as she read the note, but her jaw tightened. Grady's threats were escalating, but fear wouldn't break her. Since the rescue event, Scout had been thriving in his new home, yet the warning left on the shelter door lingered in Harper's mind. Late one evening, as she sorted adoption paperwork, Andrew appeared with a steaming cup of tea. "Thought you could use this," he said with a small smile. Harper exhaled. "We should be celebrating. The event was a success." Andrew sat across from her, studying her face. "But you're worried. It's Grady, isn't it?" She hesitated, then nodded. "The note, the threats. I feel like I'm waiting for his next move." Andrew's expression darkened. "He's trying to scare you because he knows he can't stop you any other way." Harper swallowed hard. "What if he escalates? What if next time it's not just threats?" Andrew leaned in. "Then we fight back. We expose him." Harper hesitated. "We don't have proof." "We'll find it," Andrew assured her. Over the next days, they dug deep, gathering evidence, talking to shelters, pet owners, rescue groups. Stories surfaced. Sick animals sold under false pretenses, missing payments, suspicious injuries. Then Harper found something. A forum thread linking Grady's kennels to stolen pets. "This is it," she whispered, showing Andrew the screen. Andrew's jaw clenched. "We need to go to the police and the press." Harper hesitated. "What if he finds out?" Andrew squeezed her shoulder. "Then we keep digging." Determined, Harper visited Grady's rumored kennel location. From a distance, she saw the rundown enclosures, the desperate barking of caged dogs. As she snapped photos, a figure stepped out. Grady, heart pounding, she ducked just in time. Had he seen her? Back at the shelter, she showed Andrew the photos. This should be enough for the authorities. But before they could act, Harper's phone buzzed. An unknown number, a chilling voice sneered, "You don't know when to quit. Walk away or you'll regret it." Harper's blood ran cold. "It's him," she whispered. Andrew's expression hardened. "That's it. We're done playing his game. We take this public." The next day, Harper stood in front of news cameras, voice steady but fierce. "Grady Walker runs an illegal kennel where dogs are neglected and abused. He's threatened us, but we refuse to be silenced. These animals can't speak for themselves, but we can." The press conference ignited outrage. Shelters, rescue groups, and the public rallied behind them. But that night, Grady retaliated. A loud crash shattered the silence. 2 dogs were missing. At the fence line, fresh tire tracks scarred the dirt. Harper's hands shook. "He took them." Andrew's fists clenched. "We're getting them back." Tip-off led them deep into the woods, to Grady's hideout. As Harper gripped the steering wheel, Tucker whined from the back seat, sensing the tension. "This is it," she said, eyes locked on the darkened road ahead. Andrew nodded. "Let's end this." As they neared the clearing, a decayed property emerged. A sagging gate hung open, the air thick with tension. Faint barking cut through the silence. Harper's pulse quickened. "They're here," she whispered. Andrew pulled out his phone. "I'll call the police." "No time," Harper interrupted. "I'll go first." Before he could object, she slipped through the gate, Tucker close behind. The barking grew louder. Harper crept to the main building, her breath shallow. In a makeshift pen, 2 trembling golden retrievers pressed against the far corner. Their eyes, fearful yet pleading, met hers. "I see them," she whispered, signaling Andrew. He nodded and disappeared back into the truck. As Harper reached for the latch, a voice sliced through the night. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She turned. Grady Walker stepped from the shadows, a crowbar glinting in his grip. "Let them go, Grady," she said firmly. "It's over, the whole town knows." He scoffed, stepping closer. "You don't scare me," Tucker growled, a low, menacing sound. Suddenly he lunged, barking furiously. The golden retrievers joined in, their cries piercing the night. Grady flinched. Red and blue lights flashed. Sirens cut through the standoff. Andrew shouted, "Harper, the police are here." Grady cursed, tossed the crowbar, and bolted into the woods. "Coward," Andrew muttered. Harper wasted no time, unfastening the pen's gate. "You're safe now," she whispered, stroking the dog's matted fur. Tucker wagged his tail, standing guard. Moments later, police officers flooded the scene. One turned to Harper with a nod of respect. "You saved them. We'll make sure he never hurts another animal." Relief flooded Harper. Andrew placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We did it." Later at the shelter, the retrievers curled up on fresh blankets. Their tails, once stiff with fear, wagged faintly. Harper knelt beside them. "No more fear," she murmured. "You're home." Just then, a sleek car pulled into the lot. A tall woman stepped out, eyes brimming with hope. "Are you Harper?" Harper nodded. The woman pulled a photograph from her purse. 2 golden retrievers, happy and free. "These are my dogs. They were stolen." Her voice cracked. "I thought I'd lost them forever." Harper's chest tightened. "They're safe now." Tears streamed as the woman embraced them. "You didn't just save them, you saved me." As she wiped her eyes, she handed Harper a business card. "I run an animal rescue. We need people like you. Let's work together." Harper exchanged a look with Andrew, who grinned. "This is what we've been working for." Harper smiled, watching the retrievers settle into their new home. This wasn't just a shelter. It was a place of healing. As she turned to lock up, Andrew smirked. "Ready for the next challenge?" "Always." Tucker barked softly, walking beside her under the starry sky. This was more than a mission. It was her purpose. If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe. Every act of kindness changes a life. See you in the next story.